we have here, we are very excited to have him here, our candidate, Mr. Ali Azeem, that accept our invitation. We are very pleased to have him here. I pass it to our Vice President, Michael Sanchez, to start our event today.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Dr. Bevan. Ali, yeah, good afternoon. So I'll call you Ali today. Just to start the interview, can you introduce yourself? What do you do, or what is your role now outside the university?
Sure thing. And firstly, let me just say I'm absolutely thrilled to be invited to talk today. A very, very important area, and great to see that some of the students, and I'm sure alumni as well, are supporting it through your initiative. So exactly as you mentioned, I'm Ali Azeem. I'm one of the candidates for Chancellor of Cambridge University. Outside of this, I work in consulting, typically in areas like innovation, technology, whether that's working on the new technology or indeed on the regulation side of things. And it's a career that I've focused a lot of my time in. But at the same time as doing that, I've always been focused on other initiatives, both within the university and outside as well. So hopefully a bit more than just a consultant that's coming here today.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I was reading your story about you posted the website, and you mentioned there that in the past you were sleeping in a homeless shelter with your mom and your sister, and right now you're already a consultant, consulting CEOs, political figures. And can you walk us through that journey? It's a very interesting journey, and like to inspire people. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. And to be fair, it's a it's a story I didn't speak about until I was probably about 40. And I was doing a TEDx talk last year, and I'd written this whole TED talk about technology and AI and the impact it will have. And my wife turned to me and she said, it's all about human first technology, and you've not mentioned anything about yourself. And I think that was probably the first time I started to really talk about this a bit more openly. But as I did, I realized it was a very important thing to talk about. And the reason is because actually that experience of having gone from, essentially the forgotten group within society to having an opportunity to come to somewhere like Cambridge, where actually the possibilities are endless, and then go on and try to make an impact in the world. All of that stuff's connected. It's not it's because of, not in spite of. And I think that that's a really important thing. And for me, this is a core part of why this is so important, because it's not just about what I might be able to do in this role. It's also about what it represents. It's really a conversation about not talking just about the probability of what will happen, but the possibility of what can happen. And that's really what I want to represent. And for me, that story is very evident. When I was even at my GCSE times, I didn't even know about Cambridge. I had never heard of it. I came from a low-income background, a low-income area. It was a very rough school. It wasn't something I was really that aware of. But it was the teachers that really put a lot of time and effort behind me and my development, and motivated me to go and pursue something. And actually, sometimes in the funniest ways. I'll give one quick story on this. I remember going into a sociology class, and we'd just done this mock exam for our GCSEs, and the teacher stands up at the front and says, your mock exam's a result. Everyone got a C or below, but one person got a B. And he comes up to me and he gives me the paper, and I got the B. I was absolutely buzzing. I was so happy. Look, I got this B. And he leans over and he whispers to me, he goes, Ali, of all the results, I'm most disappointed in yours. And I couldn't believe it. I said, what do you mean? I got the highest in the class. This is great. What do you mean? And he said to me, when will you realize you're not competing against the class, you're competing against the country? And that to me was a real change in thinking and perspective. But as I said, having had those challenging experiences in the past and being pushed by my teachers, it really then prompted me to not only get into Cambridge, but to do something meaningful with it. And I like to think that the work I've done, whether it's advising CEOs, whether it's advising cabinet ministers, whether it's advising charities as a trustee or as a consultant, all of those things have had an impact on what I think are very important issues.
Yeah, that's very very inspiring story. You mentioned about the hardship. Can you describe what kind of character this past has built in you, and how would you transfer it to becoming in your role as a chancellor if ever you get elected?
It's a good question, and I'm gonna trust in you guys, and I'm gonna be really real about this because I
Mm,
can give you the nice sugar-coated story about some of this stuff, but I believe in real talk.
yeah.
I think when you go through something like that, it can give you, not always, it can sometimes work obviously the complete opposite way, but it can give you a drive to push yourself harder than anybody else would
Mm,
because you've seen what it means to hit rock bottom at an early age and you don't want to be there again. You know, if you've been there sitting in a damp room with nothing there, none of your toys, nothing, at an early age, you have a drive to say, I'm not going to let myself ever be in this position again,
yeah.
right? And that is a very powerful motivator. At the same time, though, it can also be something that you have to learn how to overcome as well. As you get
Mm,
older, and you've overcome some of those things, there is still a little bit of that anxiety that still lives within you about
mm,
what happens if it all goes tomorrow. What happens with all these things? And this is the thing that often, when you hear people talk about this, I came from nothing to something. It's
uh-huh.
often the part of the story that never gets discussed, and I'm mentioning it now because I recognize that this is something that is worth talking about.
Mm,
But what it also means is, bringing it back to this role, is I understand why this is such an important role. Why I understand um, bringing some of that experience and learning and seeing how we can avoid other students having to suffer some of those same challenges
mm,
is so vital. And I truly believe in my heart of hearts that Cambridge is the type of institution that can really help people bring out the best in themselves, and not only for themselves, but also for society. And I want that to be an option for everyone. And I think, given those challenges and given that unyielding drive to push and work harder and do all of those things. As I said, it can have its down points,
yeah.
but I'm sure it will bring about lots of energy and change and drive in this role. Not only as the youngest candidate that there is on the roster, but also I would say one that has the most to show that they can give back to what Cambridge has brought.
All right. Yeah, very good. So you mentioned about your youth, your drive, and your possibly your persistence because of the what you've experienced in the past. So, um, how would you expand or your role as a chancellor? Because we see the chancellors sometimes they're mostly ceremonial. And how would you use this or expand your role to become more impactful and achieve those goals that you wanted?
I think it's really important to understand why there are some benefits on an executive versus a non-executive role. And I think that's not to say we want to keep everything exactly the same, but um, I don't think that what Cambridge needs is another sort of vice chancellor
Mm,
trying to make things different and change things. There are some benefits on the current setup. So let's start there. What are some of the key things that need to happen there?
mm,
One is around being the representative and the figurehead for the university. What the person we select for chancellor will have a massive impact on how the university is received and how it's perceived by
yeah.
others. Um, I, I mentioned this online as part of my campaign.
Mm,
For half a millennia, we've had a long string of lords, barons, earls, even princes
yeah.
in this role.
Mm,
That's what has typically been the expectation in this role. Um, I think having somebody who's come from quite literally the other end of the spectrum says amazing amounts about how far we've come and what we really are about championing. And that is not about me or celebrating me. It's about celebrating us and celebrating our university and saying, actually, we're a university for everyone. Where you can come from any background. Yes, you could be a prince, you could be a pauper. That's fine, but we're going to bring that. And I think that part of the representation, I think, is still very important, and hopefully something that I can contribute that is different to what other candidates can. I think there's a second part which is around talking about where the university needs to go and talking about key parts of its direction. And again, as somebody who has spent their entire life in the world of change, both personally, as we've spoken about from the story, but also from my own career around technology, around a whole bunch of other things. And although it didn't mention it as much in my statement, I've done a lot of work on social impact, which you will see from a few of the initiatives, on working on climate change, and particularly with companies on how they can be better on the sustainability side. And working on just general changes that are coming from a technological transformational perspective. I think having a young, dynamic, plugged in chancellor allows for those conversations to be more impactful and real as well. You know, this isn't somebody who is talking about this from an academic perspective. I've worked on these challenges my entire career. I'm probably one of the few who comes from a computer science background, for example, and during the time of AI, this is a big important thing. So I think that part is still very relevant. But finally, your point, Michael, about expanding this role, absolutely, we need to see ways that we can do that to make it effective. And at the very least, it needs to be on pushing for the right types of things. I mean, again, if we talk about sustainability, Cambridge has fallen considerably in the last 2 years in particular on a whole bunch of rankings. And some have gone from around 20 down to 120, largely owing to effectively the governance side within the university. So we need to rectify that. And I think as Chancellor, there's an opportunity to do that. Greater representation of students on the boards, more clarity and transparency around where investment decisions are being made. These are the types of things where if we just fix them, that will already increase our standing.
Yeah, that's very good, actually. Yeah, I think sustainability is really one of the things. That's why Cambridge has been not really, pushing higher in the academic, the rankings because of that one. So, you mentioned about perception. This is one of the things that you want to manage the perception. What kind of perception do you think we have right now, and what would you like it to be if you become a chancellor?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that perception changes in each person's mind. I think for most, it's still this very out of reach, slightly old, slightly archaic, but beautiful place. And I think that you want to retain some of that charm. I'm not going to take that away. But actually, we also want to be seen at the cutting edge as well. Again, I was a Komsky when I was at university there, and I remember when I joined, we'd just opened up the William Gates building, I think it was. And I mean, this is an incredible place where incredible work's being done. But that's not what people think about when they think about Cambridge University. We should be pushing a lot more strongly on our AI credentials, on what we're doing from a technology perspective, and push further on other areas where there is a technological based change that's going on. And I would love to move us more towards that. I think particularly with what's going on in the US right now and this withdrawal, if you like, from some of the core principles that I think are foundational to universities, such as freedom of speech and the ability to express oneself. I think Cambridge has the opportunity to bring a lot of that talent, a lot of that investment, a lot of that energy to the UK. And it's one of the key powerhouses and one of the key differentiators compared to any other place. So let's really make this a strong, clear, forward-looking institution and not one that's just defined by the last 800 years of history.
Yeah, I see your point, because I mean, if you would see, Cambridge would like to be defined more than just being founded in the 1300s, but something that's really relevant to the current era we are in right now. You spoke about AI. That's really very interesting. How would you put Cambridge in the map for that specific discipline?
So again, I want to be careful not to overstep my position if I were elected. But for me, at least, I think there are different ways that we can talk about this. In terms of AI leadership, I think that there is a big piece that needs to be done around having the capabilities of being the center of excellence. And quite frankly, that requires money. We need to get more funding behind this. And if you're speaking with people and you're trying to convince them to give money on a topic like AI, I think it helps if you know what you're talking about. I think it helps if you have some experience of this, if you come from a technical background and you can express what is it that you're trying to develop, rather than just saying, hey, can you put in 50 million behind this new AI lab? What's the lab going to do? How's it going to work? What's 50 million being spent on? Don't ask me, I just work here. That's not going to be a good enough answer. I think we really need to have somebody who can say, right, this is what we're trying to build. You know, in terms of an LLM, this is what we're investing in creating a new one using these data. So, you know, have those types of conversations. And I think that's something that as a chancellor, I would be able to engage in more fully. So that will be one thing. I think the second thing, though, is perhaps a little bit trickier, and that is thinking about the curriculum and the way that students are actually interacting with AI. I still remember when I went to university and I was studying computer science, and I was also looking at other universities. And I went to Imperial, and Imperial, they had this big grey building that it looked like a riot-proof concrete block from the 60s called the Huxley Building. It looked absolutely hideous, but you went in and it was futuristic. I mean, it had all the tech and all this stuff. At the time, it had a 1 gigabyte internet connection, which is less than what I have at home now. But at that time, that was mind-blowing, right? You can download a film in 5 minutes. And they were talking me through, you know, we you know, in the first 2 weeks you do your Java, we then do Python, we then move on to C++. You know, they were going through all of this stuff. Like, wow, these guys are really clued up on all of this and using all the latest tech. Yeah, I went to Cambridge and I was having a similar conversation. Like, we're going to talk about the history of computing, and we're going to talk about these types of things. I'm like, so when are we going to get to the programming side? Like, yeah, we don't really do the programming. And I was like, really? And at this point, I was kept pushing on this and kept, you know, I'm very surprised as a 18-year-old hearing that this is not going to be a big part of a computer science degree. And this very lovely and slightly older gentleman as a professor then turns to me with this slight glint in his eyes, and he says, "Look, you're smart enough that you'll be able to pick up any computer programming language that you want when you graduate. But what we will teach you is how to think, so that when you do, you will be able to code 100, 1,000, 10,000 times more efficiently." Now, I would love for that was me sold, right? That was me sold. I would love to have that kind of concept applied to how we approach AI, not for us to shy away from it, but even if we do, it's because we're going to approach it in a more impactful way. So what's our answer to that?
All right, thanks for that. This is a very good answer about how it's a very specific answer and how we can really leverage your role towards this. Let's go to sustainability. What are your visions on how you can make your role nudge, you know, the vice chancellors, all the other colleges in adopting a more sustainable, governance?
Sure. Look, sustainability.
And maybe I want to chip in very quickly. The reason why we're asking this, because we look at all the candidate statements that are on the university website, and we couldn't find anything about that in your statement, whereas some of the other candidates have that as a key component of their campaign. And one of the candidates we talked to yesterday, Tony Booth, he says we need a reverse Manhattan project, and this is the most urgent thing that humanity should focus on at the moment. And he got the second most numbers of nominations, despite being not someone famous. And it seems like a lot of people support him on this. And then we saw you didn't mention anything about this in your statement. So that's why we're asking.
Absolutely. It's a fair question to ask. And look, there are too many topics, too many things happening to mention everything. For me, the catch-all on this was very, very clear. The world is changing. It's changing economically, militarily, socially, and indeed environmentally. There is a myriad of different changes that are going on right now. What we need is a candidate who can help with transitioning with change. And that's precisely been my background and my experience. I think it's great to have a passion and interest and drive behind a particular topic like the environment. But it's not the only topic that we have to navigate in today's world. There are actually many. So you need to be able to work across all of those. On sustainability, as I mentioned, I've worked on this for lots of big companies as a advisor and as a strategy consultant on what to do specifically around sustainability and ESG, as well as a few other things. And I would be very keen on leveraging any of that and any and all of that experience in order to make those changes and that advice. And that includes what I was saying to Michael earlier about when it comes to thinking about why we're falling down the ranking so much. Why is it that we're going from, top 25 down to bottom 150? And that to me a very telling situation. And I think pushing for the right changes from a structural perspective is what's really key here. To really think, what is it that is going to move the dial? Not just from one person speaking about it, because that's just one person speaking about it. It needs to be more structural. It needs to be more about exactly as I was saying before, having students on the bodies, making sure that there's transparency around some of the numbers. These are the types of things that will actually help us move the needle beyond any one individual.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And let's go now to social impact. You mentioned that it is also one of your priorities, social impact. What things have you done before, and what things are you planning in the future, if ever you get elected as a chancellor?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. In part owing to some of my own upbringing and experiences, but I think in general, I've always worked very hard on topics around equality. For me, this is one of the most important things. And I spoke earlier about systematic focus. I believe that this is one that if you make a place genuinely inclusive and give people opportunity, equality of opportunity to rise based on their talents and their capabilities, you get better results for everyone. I'm a very, very strong believer in this. From the start of my career, I was working on areas like Race for Equality, which was by business in the community, and was one of the key voices on that for Race for Equality, where we talked about why it was important to have diversity within the workplace. I've worked on increasing representation in politics, particularly at the higher level through a group called Reaches, which is around increasing representation from candidates of different regions, economic areas, cultures, heritage, experiences, and sexuality. So really across the whole broad spectrum. And most recently, I've been working with my old college at Cambridge in order to create a new neurodiversity initiative to find ways from start to finish to support neurodiverse students. And that means thinking about it from an entrance perspective, where many students might not even make it into Cambridge because they're being tested in a way that doesn't really fit with them. Sometimes say assessments of how does a fish climb a tree? That's not going to be the best way to assess how they are or what their capability is. To some of the environmental factors of where they might have too much noise or no spaces to get away, to the social real holistic approach. And for me, this was important. And actually, when I first started this initiative, it was important because two things. One, it's an under-focused area, which is of quite a hidden disability in many cases. You might not even know that somebody is neurodiverse. They might not even know that they are neurodiverse. It's that hidden. So I wanted it to be something that you can't just see. So that was a really important thing for me. And two, it was just to really make sure that we are getting much more diversity within our thinking. So not just in terms of people's background, but also in terms of the way that minds are working, because I believe that's where amazing things can happen. That these what we call neurodiverse conditions can actually be superpowers in the own way with their own challenges. They have their own versions of their kryptonite, but that's fine. That, we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses or areas that we need to support on. So that's been the latest focus. And then there've been a whole bunch of other things around that as well. And I'm a trustee for the Big Kid Foundation, which is, if you like, the other end of the academic spectrum. It's young children who are at risk of being excluded from schools, and intervening with them to avoid them, dropping out of school and effectively becoming less productive, or even worse, turning to crime. And we've actually seen that our program helps bring them back on track. So for me, this entire point around social impact and inclusion, it's been very core to what I've done my entire life.
Wow,
Thank you,
that's
Ali. Maybe Michael, one more question as we are about to run out of time.
Yeah,
And
I have another question. Yeah, so maybe this is the last question and also your final statement.
Yeah.
If ever elected, what would you do in the first 100 days of your tenure, and then how would you like to be known as, your legacy? What would you like to be your legacy?
Let me start with the second part first. I think the truth is the biggest legacy that I could leave is for it to have been, in the long run, seen as an almost unremarkable thing that I was elected. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but hear me out. As I said before, this has always been a position for the nobility and for some of the grandees, and typically people are a lot older and a lot more focused on the past. What I would love is, in the long run, candidates like me become more common. In fact, I would love for candidates like me to become the norm, for it to be for younger people with forward-looking ideas and from different world experiences to be the Chancellor. And for anyone to look at the Cambridge Chancellor, which could be, a person from a completely different background or from different walk of life, and think that's normal, that's expected. I can't say that today, but I would love to say that in 30 years' time, say.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what I would do then in the first 100 days, well, I think it would link in very closely to the three pillars that I mentioned. I would work very hard to start talking and promoting what we're doing at Cambridge, in the hope that we could see more admissions from people from all different backgrounds. For me, I'm a big believer that there is talent all over this country, but not all of it comes to the fore. Heck, I know that it wouldn't have been me if I hadn't been pushed by my teachers to do this. And I'm sure there are many others who are much brighter and more talented than I, that are, scared from putting themselves forward, or might not even know about it. So that would be a big part to start with in those first 100 days. I think the second part would be around having those conversations around what are some of the things we need to do, the nudges, as you mentioned, what we're doing on topics like sustainability, what we're doing on topics like technology, AI, and really trying to push the envelope on where we are with some of these key topics. And then finally, taking both of those two areas and putting that forwards to potential donors and saying, this is the university of the future. We have a great past. We're proud of our past, but we haven't even our best years are ahead of us. And I want to be able to represent that, harness the energy and drive to get more people excited about investing in Cambridge, not because of its name or its history, but because of where it's going to go.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much, Ali. Yeah, I'll give it to Patrick. If you have
pleasure.
any more questions or closing statements?
Well, we could go on, but Ali, you said you have to go, so we'll let you go if you have other appointments. Thanks for joining us today. And
it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
And good luck with your campaign.
All right.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
JP.
you. It's a great
Thank you.
Thank you,
interview.
Dr.
Thank
Renata.
you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.